Okay. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon on the East Coast, morning to everyone else. Welcome to the Eclipse Day FFLGuard California webinar. Although Californians, I'm sure you're not that excited about the eclipse because I don't even think you're going to get but 2% coverage out there. Alexis is dead in the path for the eclipse today. However, I think you got some cloudy weather, don't you? Is it, you going to be able
Yep,
to?
it's pretty cloudy here.
Yep. And we will get a pretty good showing down here in Florida. I think we're due to get like 73% coverage. So I'm going to go outside and stare directly into it and then apply for workman's comp tomorrow. With us today, we have our guy, Mike Franzak, coming to us from Delaware, and Avis, who's at the beach in North Myrtle, not Dirty Myrtle. She's in North Myrtle, so we always make sure that we say that. Alexis is joining us from right outside of Austin. Matt Cubiero and Chuck Michele are here from Michele Associates in California. And we just finished a rather long federal webinar. I believe most of you were in there, but I just want to do the announcements at the beginning first, and then I will let the crew take over from here. Number one, we have a new version of the Law Plus guidelines coming out. You should see it at some point this week. Number two, the webinar will be moving from Zoom to Teams. So please make sure you check your emails regularly. We will no longer be utilizing Zoom. We are moving everything over to Teams, and you will be seeing changes to the website over the course of the next couple months as well. And number three, there really was no number three. It was to remind everyone that Trent Yeager joined us earlier. If you have any insurance needs, please reach out to Trent at asisaves.com. asisaves.com. Before we get to our guys in California, I just want to have Alexis reiterate what she discussed about the electronic software systems, and then Mike Franzak give a couple quick updates of what he spoke about this morning, and then we'll shoot it over to California. Alexis?
Yeah, so just wanted to take a little time because we're seeing some major issues with software providers to the industry. And I want to go over some of the things. As an FFL, it is your sole responsibility to maintain your compliance. It is not a viable defense to say it was the software's fault. And so to that end, I think it's important that you guys know that we have been seeing a lot of issues with software out there, particularly one that is absolutely troubling, where the software has a NICS integration with it for the 4473s, and things that were marked as denied were actually by the software indicated as no response, and firearms were released on a denied. And again, the software provider hasn't notified the customer. And so I wanted to reiterate, guys, it is hugely important that you know your software and that you have a software you can trust. There are dozens upon dozens upon dozens of software providers to the industry. There are only two that actually have a legal or compliance group that they work with. Obviously, we work with Fastbound. And that's something that's, we guarantee that software for their compliance because of that relationship that we have. And we're very confident in Fastbound. But other things that are out there, it's your responsibility to know as the FFL. And we just want to be sure, that our FFLs understand that it's huge and it can lead to revocations, even just relying on your software. So knowing who your partner is, understanding when they're going to notify you, because to our knowledge, this software provider still hasn't notified their customers that this has happened. So again, just hugely important that you understand. And one of the other things that's come up a lot lately is just because your software allows you to digitally complete a 4473, and maybe that software stores a digital copy of the 4473, does not mean that you have digital 4473 storage. That's a whole separate ruling. It's a whole separate piece. And there are plenty of software providers out there that store the forms digitally, allow you to complete them digitally, but they do not meet the requirements for digital form 4473 storage. Um, and to use digital form 4473 storage, you had to have notified the ATF and given them 60 days prior to implementing such storage. And typically your software provider is going to charge you for that. So if you're not paying extra for it and you didn't notify ATF, and again, you don't have the right to digitally store those forms. So be sure you know, be sure you're on top of your compliance. And one of the biggest parts of that is understanding your software and your software partner and knowing that even if they make the mistake, it's on you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Franzak.
Yes, sir. A couple things that I discussed this morning earlier was one is the ATF Form 3310.12, the multiple sale of certain rifles for law enforcement purposes. So the requirements for that reporting requirement, actually, that doesn't make sense the way I said that, but anyway, it's now going to be added for type 07 and type 08 FFLs. Previously, type 07 and 08 FFLs did not have to report the multiple sale of certain rifles. Now that's going to be becoming a fact, possibly as early as sometime in May of this year. ATF has the form currently with the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, for approval. So if that gets a pretty straightforward one, they're just adding us, two different types of FFLs to that form. It should be pretty straightforward. That should be a pretty quick approval process for OMB. But again, it could be delayed. But it's going to affect those FFLs on those southwest border states that are already reporting the type 01s, type 2s, but it's going to be now going to be applied to the type 07 and type 08 licenses. It does not apply for short barrel rifles, though. Nothing else is going to change on the form except for the fact that type 07 and 08 FFLs will now have to report those multiple sale of rifles. Another thing I wanted just to touch base on is 4473. And I thank Alexis for this earlier. I'll thank her again for this, for noticing an article regarding U.S. Census is going to be adding or combining race and ethnicity into one item and this goes across the government as a whole, not just ATF, the government as a whole adding this, but it does affect the 4473 and other ATF forms. So sometime in the future, that 4473 will be changing once again to everyone's chagrin. Also, we've gone, and I think we've got one person we're still waiting to talk to in California about this. We were doing a lot of, recently doing multiple, I should say, self-reporting letters to ATF for violations that have occurred. If we have you do a self-reporting letter to ATF, usually we're sending it to the DIO or maybe specifically the area supervisor in your area. If ATF comes back and comes in for an inspection immediately after notifying them, please let us know. Please let us know when you submit that letter, and also if ATF responds in any way to that letter, be it just thank you or noted or whatever. If they even come to visit you, let us know. That way we're aware that they're coming out. Again, we're self-reporting that for a reason, to get ahead of it. DOJ likes the fact that FFLs self-report violations when they're doing their due diligence and reviewing their forms and other required GCA records. So keep that in mind also. Back to you, Mr. Bryan.
Avis, do we forget anything?
Nope, I think we're good.
All
Let's
right, then without
California.
without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck. Chuck, you or Matt, whoever wants to take the floor, feel free.
Matt, why don't you go first, talk about the legislature?
Okay. So big news, at least since the last meeting that we had. First and foremost, the Department of Justice has proposed a emergency regulatory package addressing what many were complaining about in their CCW Instructor Regulations. Specifically, what the DOJ is trying to do here is they're trying to, I should say, make it a little easier for people to become CCW instructors. And the way they're going about doing that is they're allowing now NRA credentials to satisfy the training requirement. We're going to be submitting a comment letter here today. This is the last day to comment on the proposal, April 8th. But basically, as it stands, there were a lot of people, of course, when DOJ proposed these CCW instructor regulations that were effectively shut out from being instructors. And that includes many FFLs here in California that ran their own training departments that had an attached range or something like that. So for those of you guys that do have an attached shooting facility of some kind to your business, this will potentially be a benefit to you if you are hoping to be able to run CCW classes at your location. So if you haven't checked that out, we'll be sure to send the link through FFLGuard here so you guys can see that. As far as the legislature is concerned, of course, the legislature is moving forward with a number of pending bills. The big news these past couple weeks is there was the one sort of monster bill that everyone was focusing on, SB 1160, which would have basically changed the entire AFS system, which, if you're not familiar with what that is, whenever you submit a DROS as a dealer, that DROS information then gets uploaded to a system in DOJ called the Automated Firearms System, or AFS. And that system is what California has as far as its record keeping for firearm transactions. It's not a registration database per se, like it has been in other states, or it's used in other states. But what this pending bill would have done is it would have turned it into a registration database where, in order to even be in simple lawful possession of a firearm, all of your guns had to be listed in the new database that this law was going to create. And there was going to be an annual registration fee, a requirement that even to be in possession of a firearm, you had to have a firearm safety certificate. All sorts of stuff was going to change that. And so that bill has been pulled by the author, Portantino, which, if you're unfamiliar with what's happened to him, he was actually primaried out for his seat here in California. So couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. But that being said, it's been pulled. So that big piece of legislation has been pulled. And of course, CRPA is through their lobbyist is working to oppose many of the bills and try and get some of the stuff at least corrected or otherwise dropped if possible. And it's still kind of in the early stages of the legislature session this year, of course, but we're getting close. The closer we get to summer, we'll have a better understanding of where things stand. And then once the legislature actually sends the bills to the governor's desk, we will then, of course, be updating you guys on what potential changes we could be facing this year. But again, this year is no exception. Last year, we saw a vast number of bills get enacted, and most notably, of course, SB 2. But then, of course, legislature does everything they do every year. This, more so than now this year than in the last year, is there's no gun control law that they don't like, and so they're working to try and make it as difficult as possible for gun owners and businesses here in the state of California. So, with that, Chuck, did you have anything you wanted to add?
What other bills are pending? There's an insurance bill.
Yeah, there's an insurance bill, FSC bill. Lots of little things, and I don't think it's a good idea for FFLs to get too worked up on or too focused on some of the pending stuff, because a lot of the stuff is subject to change, and so it's not something that it's necessarily a good idea just to waste your time to try and get the details of everything that's going on right now. But you should still be updated and pay attention to the updates from the CRPA. As far as what's happening in the legislature, and of course, voice your opposition to whatever proposals that they have.
Maybe pass along the CRPA bulletins that you get to your subscribers. Because one thing that 1160 did was really, finally, the mask was off on the agenda of the rigged Sacramento legislature. Every single gun would be registered. Every single gun, including non-duty guns by cops, antiques, curios and relics, collectibles, everything. And every single gun would be taxed every single year. So if you had a lot of guns, you'd be spending thousands of dollars a year just to register those guns. That woke people up. That's the one good thing about that. And in a kind of a ironic twist, I'm sort of sad it got pulled so fast. It may be back, but now I don't want people to go back to sleep. You know, we got a sleeping tiger. If every gun owner who had a self-defense handgun in his dresser was involved, at least informed, we could change a lot of politicians' seats. And so wherever you're at in California, I hope you're plugging into the CRPA chapters. You should be involved with them. And also be aware, CRPA now has, Matt and I designed a training program, California-specific training program that covers California law, that a lot of the NRA programs are designed for our national audience, so they don't get that specific about the California component. So you might want to take advantage of that too, and you can get your folks certified as CRPA trainers fairly easily, and then teach the classes that have the California component in them as well. So help us keep people aware of how, you know, this is all the Bruin pushback. This is the we hate the Supreme Court response from people who ultimately want to ban guns. And that's where that registration and taxation thing would have gone. You know, they know where every single gun is. Makes it easier to go out and take one away or put people in jail if they don't register them. That's going to have a chilling effect on gun ownership. And that's what they're trying to do. They want to red tape the right to death and make people think it's more trouble than it's worth to try and go get a gun for all the folks on a fence. But so CRPA is very involved in the fight. We have multiple lawsuits. The primary one that everybody should be watching is the Duncan case. This is the magazine capacity limitation, the ban on magazines that hold over 10 rounds. That case has been going on for like 7 years now. Went all the way up to the Supreme Court, came all the way back down, and now it's back up in the en banc panel in the Ninth Circuit. And there's a whole bunch of controversy about whether or not that particular en banc panel with those particular 11 judges was the right composition for that panel, because a lot of those judges are now senior judges, and senior judges aren't eligible for an en banc panel. So there's a fight over that procedure. But in the meantime, multiple cases are backed up behind Duncan, just like they were the first time around. So you got the Miller case, which is the assault weapon ban that we won in front of Benitez. We've got the Rhodey case, which is the ammo background check, which we won in front of Benitez twice. What am I forgetting, Matt?
The May case is the other.
Well, that's sensitive places, but on the hardware bans,
it's
what was Tedder again? That's the Hawaii knife ban.
Yeah, that's the, I think it's the what's it called, the butterfly knife case,
and that's backed up behind Duncan now too, right? They stayed that pending Duncan.
Yeah,
oh, and Boland, the roster case is now stayed pending Duncan. So all these cases, there's a huge bottleneck behind Duncan, which is in the en banc court.
Yeah.
Meantime, Illinois has asked the Supreme Court to intervene in their semi-auto and magazine capacity ban. And we have Rahimi that will come out of the Supreme Court in June and may address the appropriate methodology, the way to apply Bruin. And this is what the battle's all about. And I said this before, I think. It's how you apply Bruin. And the states, with the help of the Bloomberg Everytown Law Group, have twisted the Bruin decision into pretzel knots And some courts are just anxious, some judges, particular individual judges, are anxious to buy into that baloney and use some kind of a distorted methodology so they can uphold more laws. So hopefully the Supreme Court will bitch slap them down, and hopefully Donald Trump will get elected so that the Supreme Court stays full of judges that are on our side of the issue. So Duncan was argued to like 2 weeks ago. Who knows when that's going to come down? They may sit on it. They probably will sit on it because they hope they can slide it over into the, with a new Supreme Court, a new president, or the same president, and a new Supreme Court that will go along with whatever baloney they cook up. In the meantime, we're still fighting, and the biggest one we're fighting is the May case. That's the sensitive places case, where they wanted to designate pretty much every public area in the state of California as a sensitive place where your CCW would be invalid. We stopped that. Interestingly enough, the merits panel, the 3-judge panel, denied the state's request for a stay. And so that law is not in effect, and your CCW is still good wherever it was historically for the last 100 years, in fact, because that's how long they've been issuing CCWs, since the 1920s. So that case is set for oral argument next week, the week after, coming up fast. We're having a moot on that today, in fact, right after this call. And we got a bad panel. We got 3 Democrats, so we'll see what happens. But there's plenty of rulings from other courts across the country saying you can't over-designate places as sensitive, which is exactly what that law tries to do. Also, Antonuk, the New York sensitive places case, has asked the Supreme Court to get in there before judgment. The Supreme Court taking any case is always a long shot, but particularly a case before judgment, it's an even longer shot. But hopefully the Supreme Court judges that are on our side recognize that they got to do this now while they can, and not take any chances that composition of the Supreme Court will change. And so we're hopeful that they will get involved. They're going to have to, and hopefully in the Rahimi case, they will straighten out that methodology, take the opportunity to straighten it in that ruling too in June. So, it's a fight for, the stakes really couldn't be much higher. We shouldn't lose, but the courts are politicized, and we could. So we really need everybody engaged, involved, informing people, and supporting the CRPA. The NRA is trying to come back into the state. I don't know exactly what that's going to mean. The NRA is basically not welcome in Sacramento. Most of the legislators there won't even talk to an NRA representative. And anything that any position the NRA takes on any bill, there's a certain group of legislators which are just committed to taking the opposite position. I don't know what else is going to happen since the first part of the trial, where Wayne LaPierre and the treasurer of the former treasurer were ordered to repay like $7 million back to the NRA for misappropriated funds. Now the judge is going to decide whether or not, without the jury's done, their job is done. Now it's up to the court to figure out basically what should be done about this beyond the repayment. And he's going to have to decide whether or not to appoint some kind of a receiver to monitor NRA's finances. We'll see if the NRA board of directors wakes up and changes their practices. If they go back to the old ways, they were doing things. If they'd have spent the money that they spent on lawyers, $100 million, doing get out the vote, we'd have a lot better politicians in office all across the country. But so we'll see what happens with them. I hope they're going to put something out basically saying, here's what we're doing. Haven't really seen much. But in the meantime, CRPA has stepped up. CRPA is funding all the lawsuits itself. We are working with GOA, GOC, SAF on all these suits. And what am I missing, Matt?
I think you covered most of it. So
Okay, I'm happy to, if you guys got questions about anything that's going on, I'm happy to answer those. And obviously you can always ask us at any time, just through FFLGuard's website's the easiest way to keep track of them. But happy to keep you informed.
Sorry, I was muted there as I had to go chase my cat around as he was chasing a gecko and destroying my office. There's stuff flying everywhere. Okay, thank you, Matt and Chuck. And a final note, unless Alexis or Avis stop me, we have scheduled our next webinar for May 13th, Monday, May 13th. It will be the day after Mother's Day. I know a lot of mothers. Oh boy, do I know a lot of mothers. But we appreciate you all being here this week. Again, if you have any questions, please utilize the help desk. Everything that comes in through the help desk can be federal or California. We will promptly move it right over to Matt and Chuck if it is for California. Again, we do ask for everyone's patience in the help desk, as you know, and as you can hear from the California guys, there is a lot going on out there. And Matt and Chuck and Josh are literally busting their butts every day to protect your rights to own your guns out there in California and to sell your guns. So we appreciate them very much. Chuck, still looking good, buddy. Keep dropping that weight over there, huh? What are you down to like 180 these days?
That's that was when I was 16. But I have lost 60 pounds, so I'm not doing too bad.
Good for you, man. Good for you. So we thank you all again for coming out, and we will see you on Monday, May 13th.
Okay, thanks everybody.